Backup and recovery has always been an integral part of any operational plan for IT. The ability to back up and recover information as needed is key. We're going to see the difference between having a plan and being able to execute on it properly, and looking at Azure services that are here to help you with that. My name is Bob Tickelman. I'm excited to be your guide for this introduction to Azure Backup. Before I get into the specific topics, I want to make sure that you understand kind of a personal belief that I have, that the only good backup that you have is the last one that you've actually restored and validated. Every other one is potentially suspect. And I know that you might already have a plan that does differentials and incrementals and full backups, but unless you've actually tested the recovery process, how do you know that the information that existed in that backup is truly valid information? Over the decades that I've been doing this, I can't tell you how many times that I've been given a recovery process only to find out that the media that was delivered to me didn't have the necessary information or it was corrupted. And besides, people back up every day and get very good at it, but how often do you restore? I've also been deployed to situations where the recovery that was implemented by the organization caused more damage than the initial loss, wiping out entire SQL servers because they recovered the SQL server and not just the database on it. So not only is a recovery and a practice recovery a skill that should be done so that you keep that skill sharp, but it also validates that as valid media to be used as a point-in-time recovery. Now, with that behind us, let's go take a look at the options that Microsoft makes available to you. And we're going to take a look at Azure Backup in a legacy environment that's still available today in what's called a Backup Recovery Vault. And then we're going to take a look at the current backup vaults and the differences between them. As you've gone through maybe other modules in this series, you've seen that throughout most of them, there's some built-in backup capabilities at the Azure service levels themselves, whether it be blob storages and the abilities to have recovery of accidentally deleted containers or blobs. In file shares, the same thing. We take a look at app service plans that have built-in backup schedules and SQL. So backup and recovery has been built throughout the entire fiber of Azure. But at all of those cases, when I introduced the topic, I also said that it does not replace the need for you to have your own backup strategy. So regardless of what services are being provided, and regardless of the backup capabilities or recovery capabilities in those services, they are no replacement for a well-tested and deployed backup and recovery strategy. And these are the tools that you want to take a look at them. And we've got a number of them that no one by themselves does it all. You maybe want to look at a grouping of them to provide the coverage that you need for your organization. Now, this is just showing you some of the landscape. We're going to show you the two major areas that provide what I'll refer to as a legacy background of more of a traditional Microsoft Backup server and a Microsoft Backup agent that you could use to both back up both on-premises and Azure and other cloud providers' infrastructure and data that you have there. And you then could recover to those locations. Then we're going to take a look at a new modern method that is more built into the Azure Fabric itself that ties tightly into a cloud deployed solution. So across all of these scenarios, you're going to see a number of options that are available to you, and it's picking the right one for the right solution. At the heart of it is the concept of a vault. And so Backup Center as a single pane of glass allows you to provide both of these environments that we took a look at. As we see, you can see on the second bullet point here, we have the two types of vaults that are available to us. Now, the Recovery Services Vault is what I'll refer to as legacy. It's not that, Microsoft is probably, cringing saying that it is still a well-supported and method that we're working with, but it's been there since the dawn of Azure. As we've evolved over the last 16 plus years, the backup vault is more tightly integrated to the Azure services themselves. So as I said, it's not that one is a legacy and one's being replaced. This is one that if you're currently using Azure, has probably been well integrated to your processes and is still going to be used and available going forward. But as Azure services become more to the core of your business, you may want to integrate more closely with the services meant for that backup, as opposed to that legacy method of backup agents and backup servers. At the heart of any backup methodology is the policy that you're going to have to back up specific information. Make sure that the information is there in its total environment, and being able to recover that information quickly and efficiently is going to be at the heart of your strategy that you're working with. So building good strategies and policies for that backup is part of what you want to look at. Now I'm going to add some more commentary in here that often backup policies are based around the speed of backup, because it's done every day. That's when time, you look at the hours different potentially every day to do something. Gosh, it'd be more efficient to possibly back up in this manner. I would caution that to compare it against the time to recover. While recovery may not have to happen often, it is very critical that you're able to recover the key services in a timely manner. I'll use an example of an Exchange server. When people would build the Exchange servers with a single information store for all the mailboxes. Probably not a good plan, because you can't get to any mailboxes until the entire mail store has been recovered. With proper planning up front, by carving off the mail store into multiple smaller components, you could put critical mailboxes into specific backup plans that back up just those mailboxes so that they could be backed up separately and more expediently than the rest of the mail people getting their mailboxes and the history that they've been working with. So really think about not just the speed of backup, you want to think about the recovery process and identify those key resources to make sure that you're going to be able to pull them out of a backup. We often talk about brick level versus entire restores. You want to be able to have that recovery capability that's going to allow you to restore operations as quickly as possible. The Business Continuity Center has been added to this to provide that single pane of glass to look at the overall landscape that you're going to be working with. Going into the Business Continuity Center, as I said, it's that single pane of glass to manage all of your BDCR, the Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery. Because in addition to a traditional backup, we've had a service called ASR, or Azure Site Recovery. And for a while, early on in the days of Azure, we used to use it as a migration tool. We would actually use ASR as a way to replicate on-premises services with a digital twin of those in the cloud. And ASR, Azure Site Recovery, would allow you, in the case of failure, to have that on-premises workload fail and potentially be rerouted to a digital twin of that environment in the cloud. And because we didn't have migration tools at the time, it was how often in services we would actually move customers' data. We do have full-blown tools now to manage that migration. But ASR is still part of a BDCR plan separate from your backup and recovery processes that you're working with. So this is part of the Business Continuity Center, where you have a single pane of glass to manage the two types of backups as well as the Azure Site Recovery capabilities. One of the tools that we had mentioned earlier is Azure File Shares. And so we're going to go in and take a look at using, as a traditional backup, Azure File Shares as a way to back up your traditional SMB-based workloads. So what I want to do is just do a quick touch of the two different types of vaults that we talked about, and we're going to go back into the Recovery Services Vault, the one that is going to tie directly into the file share specifically. I've got two tabs that I'm going to bounce back and forth between, but you can see I'm currently in the Recovery Services Vault area. I've got a Recovery Services Vault configured, and over here I've got my backup vault. Now they look very similar, and the actual process to build them has almost exactly the same characteristics. And it will very closely mirror the process of creating a storage account, if you remember or have been already watching the video on Azure Storage. We took a look at the type of storage, and is it geo-redundant? Is it zone redundant? So I'm actually going to do one of those. Create a new vault. I'm going to go into a resource group. What region do I want it deployed into? And then we get into that redundancy. So if you had taken the storage class, we talked about, is it locally redundant, zone redundant, geo-redundant? And make it locally. We get into that encryption feature. We talked about Microsoft keys versus user-defined keys. What are the vault properties? Are they immutable? Networking services. So what you're seeing here and through the previous several sets of tabs is similar configurations that you did during the creation of a storage account. What kind of replication happens? What kind of keys are being brought? Was it available publicly or privately? So this is very similar because that's what it is. We just call it a vault, but it's a storage location using a lot of the same principles that you used for the storage account. I'm going to cancel out of here and just go back in. Now, to back up the file shares, it's using the Recovery Services Vault, that long-lived, I'm going to stop trying to use that term legacy, but I just did, the long-standing way to back up services. So once I get into a vault here, specifically Recovery Services Vault, I want to create a backup policy. And that policy is going to say, where do I want to back up the workload? Is it running in Azure? Is it running on Azure Stack Hub, which is a utility? If you go back to one of the very first modules that we delivered on Azure Governance, I talked about the 3 different types of Azure. There's public Azure, which we've been in for all these modules. I talked about a thing called a sovereign cloud, where we have one for the US government, we have one for the German government, and one for the Chinese, which is a separate implementation. And at the time, I talked about Azure Stack Hub as a way to get Azure services in an on-premises location. I've personally been involved with deploying them out to oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. I've been on cruise ships to deploy them to manage all the services and the point of sale systems. So you can actually get Azure in these different environments. So where am I trying to back up services? And it provides that one ring that rules them all. You can now use Azure to back up your services on premises. Now, you're going to hear the term called a MABS, a Microsoft Azure Backup Service, and a Microsoft Backup Server. These are 2 different ways to deploy these, and you'll see this come up. One is an agent that is going to collect that information and put the information directly into the vault. That's going to be great for a lot of these Azure services. When you go on premises, though, you could still use an agent, but you may also want to use a backup server. It serves 2 different components. You'll see in the charts it talks about, does one allow bare metal? So can you recover a server from bare metal to be able to restore it? Or do you have to have an operating system up to get the agent on to go get the information from the vault to recover that server? Or as I said, can you just recover it from bare metal? The other benefit of the backup server is you can cache or store values of a backup locally. So let's say you had a large amount of backup to do. It would back it up to the local server, and maybe off hours, it could then copy that information up into the cloud. Great. But if I want to, I could keep portions of that locally, so that if I needed them for recovery for an expedient process, instead of having to copy it down from the cloud, I could go back to 1 or 2 or 3 days worth, how much storage you ever have locally. I could get that information using the local backup server. But I'm going to an Azure service, and then which service do I want to work with? A virtual machine, and there's the file shares themselves. What is the storage account that I want to work with? Oh, no, there we go. Now what I want to do is pick up my policy. I can already have one built, or I can pick up a policy. And so this just becomes, is it a snapshot? Is it a vault standard? What is the frequency and the time of day that I want to work with? What is the retention period? So that just becomes the policy that you're working with, and then you can enable the backup. So there's a small introduction to the different types of backups, comparing the Recovery Services Vault versus the Backup Vault, and looking at which services they target best and how you could set them up by configuring a policy. Let's return back to the lecture. So we've seen that Microsoft provides a wide range of backup and recovery options available through Azure. We've got the long-lived Azure Recovery Vault that you now could use to back up on premises, as well as a wide range of cloud and other cloud providers' services into a single location. We saw that legacy component provided for backup of the on-premises environment, Azure in its environment, as well as the various types of Azure that we had. It came in several forms with an agent and a backup server capability, as well as a newer version of this with the Backup Vault that more tightly integrates to the Azure services themselves. And through the Backup Center, we had the capability of having a single pane of glass that manages both of the backup types, as well as the ASR or Azure Site Recovery, which we'll be covering in a later module. Thanks for joining us for this session. To continue your learning, watch other videos in the course or explore more on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.